We're starting off with the HOA title story with a brand new update. You're going to love this one. Here we go. Put a lien on my neighbors for not being able to pay an illegal special assessment. I'll put a lien on your $20 million mansion. Posted by MKR01. This may be the most petty thing I have ever done in my life. I'm a pretty petty person, and I also believe in malicious compliance, but this takes the cake. So I bought a condo in a building in a large city in the US about 2.5 years ago. The building has an HOA that we all pay into monthly. Since I've lived here, the building has rapidly deteriorated, and we have all hired an attorney for a class action style lawsuit. I'm talking broken elevators, broken rooftop AC units, the pool was empty for 4 months during the summer, and so on. The people in the building are great though, and we are a friendly bunch. Last year, I took the HOA to small claims court because they failed to provide financial documents that show us how our fees are being spent. As this is a legal requirement for all HOAs in my state, I won the case and was awarded the $30 filing fee plus $1. Symbolic, I sued for documents and not money. The fact that they can't provide the docs as they are legally required to do is a separate issue, among others, including possible criming that we've hired the attorneys for. I have asked the HOA to pay the $31 to me, and the president of the HOA wants to either meet me somewhere private to give it to me, or he wants to mail me a satisfaction of judgment form, have me sign it and mail it back to him, and then he will mail me a check. No to both. 3 days after I won the case, the HOA announced that they were going to charge us all a special assessment of about $1,000 each and an increase in our monthly dues of 10%. In my state, a membership vote gets triggered if you charge a special assessment that brings the building more than 5% its yearly income, which means 51% of the owners must approve of the assessment for it to take effect. As this money is about 20% of our yearly income, a vote should have taken place. When we asked about this vote, the HOA said that it was being made under an emergency clause, which means that the membership vote doesn't have to take place. The emergency? Fixing the elevator that broke on December 24, 2021. The spirit of the emergency clause is for things like fire and earthquake, flood, and so on, not a broken elevator that's been broken for a year already. When there was understandable pushback, the HOA sent out a little email stating that anyone who didn't pay the assessment would have a lien put on their unit. The liens came down yesterday to those that couldn't pay $1,000 on short notice. Our attorneys told us that even though the money is still in dispute, we still have to pay it, and I did pay mine, but we also have a lot of retirees and lower income people in the building. The HOA president's house is currently on the market for $20 million. I just got back from the courthouse where I filed a $31 lien against it for $140, clouding its title. It's a matter of principle, not money. Now, the title can't change hands until he pays me my $31, and I am perfectly within my rights to collect on a judgment owed. I will for sure keep you guys updated after the attorneys do their thing. That might be a story for Pro Revenge though. And some confusion here. I initially filed a small claim with the HOA as defendant. The small claim judge determined that was incorrect and said I should sue the individual as the president of the HOA and made me amend the case. Therefore, the defendant in this whole case was the one individual person, and therefore, he is responsible for the $31, and I can exercise my right to put a lien on his home in my effort to collect. I can only put a lien against the defendant, and the defendant is a person. I can't put a lien against the HOA because they were not the defendant in the case. The courts had already determined that the person owes me money. I don't need to continue to argue a case that I've already won. People are accusing me of lying because they don't understand the legal system. Thank you to all those that are supporting my efforts. We hope to have the people overthrown and in prison by the end of the year. We've turned over all that we have to our attorneys, who are the best HOA attorneys in LA. We will get these people. The update. So a couple of weeks ago, we were all informed that there's going to be a second special assessment this year. Our last one was about $1 per square foot, and this one is $1.25 per square foot. I'm getting a rhinoplasty next month and just can't afford to plop another $1,250 to these people, and therefore I'm not paying. This, combined with the SA from a few months ago, equals about 45% of our building's income, well over the 5% limit in the state of California. Several other people are not paying because they either can't afford it or simply think it's too much. Both are valid. He can lien my unit all day and every day. I will go to court hearings about it and get it thrown out. Our HOA recall election was tonight. 5 seats on the board. Us individual homeowners put forth 3 candidates. The 3 of us spent many Sundays going door-to-door campaigning, and we did get a lot of neutral owners on board. With the ballots, you can either mail them in or fill them out in person. Most of us elect to mail them in, and there were 2 questions on them. First, do you approve of the recall election? And next, place your vote for the candidates in this grid. Unfortunately, several people skipped question 1, and approval for the recall was therefore less than 51%. The family of crooks that run our building now own 119 units out of the 180, and we just didn't get it. After the election, there was an HOA meeting. I find these things an absolute waste of time, a stupid meeting ran by stupid people, but I did show up about 20 minutes late for about 10 minutes, and a literal fistfight almost broke out, and the family announced that, even though I have a seat on the board, they are no longer including me in meetings because I am disrespectful. People literally started screaming. Another owner made an audio recording of the whole thing, and I sent it along to our attorney. Our HOA bylaws require mediation before litigation, and so we have that coming up, in which we are asking for a large sum of money, our attorney fees, and this family to give up their positions of power and have their voting rights stripped permanently. If they refuse, we go to litigation, and a judge will subpoena their financial records, which will show laundering, embezzlement, theft, and God knows what else. So I have a pretty good feeling that they'll accept to avoid the alternative potential prison. Also, the house I put the lien on still hasn't sold, so I still haven't gotten my $31, and our elevators still don't work. Next update. I took the advice of some commenters and reported this family to the IRS. I sent an email to our internal email Google group that I manage and that has all the other owners on it with a link to print out the form and an invitation to do the same. 3 days later, I was served with a cease and desist regarding defamation. I found out later that Jerkboy threatened another tenant into forwarding the email to him. I have informed our attorneys of this. I regarded the cease and desist as a type of slap and promptly disregarded, as there is never anything wrong with cooperating with a government agency. I've not yet heard anything else regarding this. Our CC&Rs require alternative dispute resolution before jumping to litigation, or ADR. We decided to go that route, and our attorneys, angels really, put together a 130-page document outlining each and every fart these people have made within their collective lifetimes, complete with numerous pages of exhibits and so on. In our demand, we ask for either complete building refurbishment or $5 million in cash to be stripped of their positions of power, and our attorney fees, which are so far about $22,000 at this point, raised through crowdsourcing within our building. This was served to them last week, and they have 30 days to respond. If they don't respond, we go directly to litigation. As a judge will subpoena every bank record for the last 20 years or so, which may uncover evidence of crimes, we feel that the Jerk and Company should feel very inclined to accept our offer. In the meantime, I got my rhinoplasty a few weeks ago. Guess which major US city I live in, and it's absolutely scorching here. Our water went out for 7 hours on Sunday, and with it, our AC as well as our HVAC units are liquid cooled. They got fixed Sunday night, and now the water just stopped working again. Nobody knows why, and as it's the middle of the night here, nothing can be done. My monthly HOA dues are due today, so I'm going to fork over $400 for what? Additionally, I made it clear that I wasn't paying the second special assessment, but I've continued paying my regular $400 monthly dues. However, they've been putting that money towards the special assessment and charging me a late fee for the remaining special assessment balance, as well as a late fee for each month for each unpaid monthly dues. Double compound late fees are illegal here, and when I reached out to the jerk secretary, she told me that it was just how our bill pay system works. They're trying to get my balance up to $1,800 so they can foreclose, which is the minimum amount required in my state. The attorneys are aware, so we shall see. He has less than 3 weeks remaining to reply to our ADR. This may have to move over to Pro Revenge at that point. And the $20 million house still hasn't sold, so I still haven't received my $31, which is clearly the real issue here. This email says check for $31. You'll receive a check for $31 via FedEx in the next few days. I'll forward the tracking number as soon as available. I expect that you'll record a satisfaction of judgment once the check clears. I believe I sent you that form earlier. Here's the newest update. So, no surprise here, our overlords did not respond in time to our ADR, so we have no choice but to file a formal lawsuit, which our attorneys are putting together now. A few other things have happened. So a guy who lives in a different building that was once owned by these same people organized a protest at our overlord's house. He put the message out the day of, and only the 2 of us showed up. No bother though, there were 6 cops there too. He found out about it and fled the area with his family, and the cops were super cool to us, explaining that we have the right to protest, we just can't be in possession of baseball bats or Molotov cocktails, and they were like, we're just going to stand off to the side. You guys can protest as long as you want. We just have to make sure there's no rioting and no trespassing. Well, it was just the 2 of us, so we ended up leaving, but it was hilarious. Back in my building, there was a tenant they're trying to evict, and so the overlord did as overlord does and cut a hole in the wall from the hallway and burst a water pipe to flood them out. The elevator bank on 5 floors was flooded along with several units on several floors. This is highly illegal, and the attorneys are aware. The next day, the water had to be shut off all day for emergency repairs. Then, I was contacted by a real estate agent who does a lot of work in our building, and he told me that the overlord let our building master hazard insurance lapse. He called the insurance company, and they said that the overlord hadn't even attempted to renew it yet, and if it lapses, it will be at least 30 days before a new policy can be put into place. Now, well, on October 1st, it lapsed, and we all got letters from our banks telling us that if we don't get a master hazard plan stat, the banks will get one on our behalf and add it to our mortgages. Turns out, this kind of plan is like $300,000 to $450,000 a year, and it can't even be purchased by individuals. So I don't know what our banks think that we can do, but that's not even the best part. 2 days ago, in the middle of the night, some huge leak or something happened on the top floor, and it flooded our building all the way to the basement, 1 unit on each floor straight down. Our CC&Rs state that plumbing and electric inside the walls is the responsibility of the owner. A clause that is likely unenforceable as condo is a legal definition and descriptor, and our HOA insurance policies only cover what is within our units and not in the walls. This created an uproar among those affected, and I told them that if they want any resolution, it's probably going to have to be handled in the courts, and that they're welcome to join our class action as a named plaintiff if they want to address this issue directly as part of it. Some are thinking about it. Our attorneys, in the meantime, told us that they believe they have found RICO violations, aka racketeering and organized crime. They said that they're going to cooperate with the FBI and the DA and the AG, but any criminal aspect is out of their control and will be handled by those parties. They also said that if it is determined that RICO violations have occurred, we get 3 times our claimed damages. I hope to bring the final chapter of this to Pro Revenge or Nuclear Revenge. What'd you think of that brand new update? Let me know. Landlord is jealous of my income, raises my rent $500. I screw him years later for $20,000. Posted by Rocky Moose. In the late 90s, wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to dink double income, no kids, for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising, and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while, and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers, and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off just her income, we would easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 a month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Wazowski. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough, but perfunctory, dry, and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal and that it was not included in the rental agreement, and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless young newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income, $75,000. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary, and we were over 6 figures in income renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, Dink is the way to go when starting out. I can't believe how much money you make, Hank must have said 6 times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year, and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward, and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later, we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up, so I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem, and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail, and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. He was super condescending to me. Rocky Moose, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less. I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford the $500, had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words. You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose. You just have to pay it. My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra month. A month later, I wrote a similar check, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but Hank still withheld $300 from our security deposit for BS things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning, sure, but $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200 and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that I saw the ad that Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we'd been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase, and it didn't rent. A month later, I saw the same ad, and he had lowered the price to $75 more than we'd been paying, and I assume it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years. Life is good, the house is good, we have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my coworkers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out. I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There's no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who is still by the reception desk. Hey Phil, I say, how do you know that name, Hank Wazowski? Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. I bought my condo through him several years ago. I'm selling my condo now so I can buy a house, so I'm going to ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him? I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and describe what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then, the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank Wazowski. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there, silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, Hank, this is my friend Rocky Moose. I think you may have already met. Yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on Main Street. Remember, the software developer who rented for a year saving to buy a house? Well, this is where I work. Here, with Phil. Hank's eyes indicate he now remembers me and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says, yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we're doing. Oh, we're just fine, thanks for asking. Phil says you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it? Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early to mid 2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Let's see, selling the condo for around $150,000 to $200,000, and you're looking at houses in the $500,000 range, so that's $650,000 to $700,000 in total transactions. An agent getting 3% on the sale and the purchase is getting around $20,000 for his trouble. That's good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone, and I am enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question, saying it's complicated, and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. It was really good to see you again, Hank, I call behind him. He exits the building. As the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear. Hey Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you. Phil looks at me and says, Rocky, what the heck was all that about? He looks PO'd and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story, the rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit, the you don't have to like it, you just have to pay it, everything. Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He is evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank. So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. But I totally see him doing that to you, he admits. There's no way I could use him now. What a jerk. Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. What do you want me to say when I fire him? I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. Hi Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not going to sign up with you. Pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that. Another pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose. Pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.